Welcome back, Disney fans. This is part 3 of Reimagining Walt Disney World. In the last two videos, we reimagined the World Showcase, both the East and the South. And now we're going to finish off with reimagining what I'm calling World Showcase West. In here, there are going to be really big additions. And I'm really excited towards it, so let's just jump right into it. The first expansion is for the Canadian Pavilion. I'm going to expand the Canadian Pavilion to add enough land for a walkthrough attraction. This expansion of the Canadian Pavilion should be more wintry and focus more on like the Canadian snow and tundra. I just feel like the Canadian Pavilion is super underutilized, right? When I go, I know sometimes I just walk right through it, and I hope that this expansion can make it much more of an attraction. Speaking of attractions, the attraction that I am adding, I'm titling A Snowflake's Journey. This is a walkthrough attraction about all things snow, ice, and snowflakes, with the animals from Brother Bear acting as guides. Guests follow the path of a snowflake, starting in a more temperate forest/river, transitioning to an icy tundra and mountains, and then completing the loop to a more temperate area again. Through interactive exhibits inspired by Brother Bear animals, guests learn about the cycles of ice crystallization in snowflakes. Some interesting techniques that could be used for this attraction are things like laminar flow to make guests think they are freezing and unfreezing water, and spraying powdered snow in twinkling lights to simulate snow in the Florida heat. This attraction is obviously inspired heavily by a highlight from EPCOT 2.0, Journey of Water, inspired by Moana, with a heavily requested IP acting as the guide, that being the Brother Bear IP. We'll get to what this is in a second, but next, skipping this green thing, I'm going to expand the UK Pavilion. I will add enough land to add a dark ride, and this expansion should be a bit more modern or urban than the current UK Pavilion style, but nothing drastic or clashing, right? I don't want like a modern day London, right? Because the rest of the UK Pavilion is a bit more classic. I just want make it a slightly more urban, and that's because I'm adding an attraction called Flying Above London. This will be a slow dark ride where Mary Poppins takes you on a tour around mid-century London. Different practical dioramas, animatronic Mary Poppins, and projected cartoon animals take you into the world of the film. The only modern elements will be cartoon projected animals that imitate the live-action film with cartoon characters. The ride vehicle should be shaped like an open umbrella, and it slowly rocks up and down, simulating the wind. I think this ride is a no-brainer, and this ride should harken back to classic Fantasyland dark rides with very limited tech and stories, but real-life historical sites of London and the surrounding area should be in the forefront. A way to imagine this ride is imagine the beginning of the Peter Pan's flight ride, where you're like flying above London, but in this ride you never leave London, and you actually, instead of going to Neverland, you take a tour of London. To the French Pavilion, I am going to retheme Remy's Ratatouille Adventure into Remy's Parisian Adventure. So, very slight rename, and that's because it's going to be a very slight change up. A slight retheme to a screen-based trackless ride where Remy scurries around all of Paris with more emphasis on the entire city instead of retelling scenes from the Ratatouille movie. Scenes in the kitchen can remain, but the core of the ride should be scurrying around Paris, not retelling the film. This change fits my core theme for the World Showcase much better. It's a character, an IP who is the draw, but they are acting as a tour guide for the actual city and culture that the pavilion is supposed to represent. This is a slight redesign to a trackless screen-based ride, so this should require basically no construction and be relatively easy. I'm not an expert on Imagineering and building rides, but one of the easiest rethemes that can be done is a retheme to a screen-based trackless ride. There's no need to change anything else. The movement of the ride can even stay the same if you want it to be. It's just changing the screens, basically. Not to undermine people's work, but I don't think that this should not cost a whole lot or be that big of a deal. It just is a slight tweak to a ride I like to fit what I want World Showcase to be. Moving back up to this green thing, you see here. First, we have to tear down the World Showcase Pavilion. This is something that I wasn't fully aware existed. I think most people aren't fully aware that this exists. This is a limited use and often private giant multi-purpose pavilion in the prime spot for where a country should be, in my opinion, for the World Showcase, and it just has to go. I didn't know what it was used for until I was doing this video, and after looking it up, it's used for private events like weddings and corporate meetings. And this stuff, obviously Disney likes this stuff, I'm not trying to undersell that, but this stuff doesn't have to happen like in the middle of the park, like right, what like that's where a country should go. This should not be a place for a private event in the middle of EPCOT. This seems to be a spot that another country pavilion could go, so that's what I'm doing. The events that used to happen here could be moved to a more backstage area. When then, like literally, this is this like that's really where a country should go. This should not be used as like a private path. You're in the middle of the World Showcase. Deciding what country to add, right? So this is the second country I'm adding. Last video I added Tunisia. Deciding what country to add in this newly created space, I followed the same rules from the last video. I wanted to put the world in World Showcase, but also wanted to keep in mind that Animal Kingdom seems to be the new home for South and Southeast Asia, as well as Sub-Saharan Africa, and now the tropical Americas. So I didn't want to pick a country from any of those regions, but I also didn't want to pick a European country since there are so many European countries. And to me, there is one big, obvious answer, and that's to add a Korean pavilion. South Korea has emerged as a cultural powerhouse in this millennium, with famous exports being the K-pop genre and Korean cuisine. This pavilion can celebrate South Korea's newly found cultural fame in the West and also act as an educational device for South Korea's rich history that might not get as much attention as like the pop cultural stuff. This land will have a mix of modern and futuristic urban-looking buildings celebrating modern-day South Korea, with cities like Seoul and its high-tech industry, as well as more historical East Asian buildings as an appreciation of the past. Depending on where you are, K-pop or more traditional Korean music will be playing, right? If you're in the modern area, perhaps K-pop will be playing. If you're in the more traditional area, then more traditional music will be playing. This land will have a sit-down Korean barbecue restaurant and a massive store selling all kinds of Korean toys, some familiar with global audiences and some new. The Korean pavilion's size and shape is a bit weird, as most pavilions are like circles or even flat rectangles, and this pavilion has much more of a hook, as it's tucked between the UK and Canada pavilion, right? Very skinny, and then it hooks back. This will cause an interesting experience where guests will actively have to go inside and explore the pavilion instead of being able to continue the World Showcase loop. The entire land is more vertical than horizontal, definitely a challenge, but also an opportunity for the Imagineers to make a bit more of a different pavilion than what normally happens. The attraction for this land I'm titling The Sounds of South Korea, a sonically immersive and impressive attraction or show that takes guests through the history of Korea and South Korea through sound and music. Crescendoing with a giant K-pop party with lasers and flashing lights, this attraction will celebrate the entirety of Korea with a joyful party for today and the future. Guests should come out of this attraction joyful, optimistic, and have extra pep in their step from the ending. Imagine a movie that ends with all the characters coming together to sing a pop song as the credits roll. That's basically what happens here. I'm not trying to play into the K-pop card too hard, but let's be honest, in today's current moment, K-pop is an incredibly powerful draw, and just like how I'm treating IPs around EPCOT, it can be a fun draw that also allows for other kinds of edutainment. And then the other thing I'm adding that you guys might have saw is this brown thing. Basically what it is right now is a small little island that you just walk through, gets you from the UK pavilion to the French pavilion. I'm gonna completely change this island and make it an actual land instead of just a path. And my idea for what this little island should be, recognizing this is a small thing, calling it a land or a pavilion is a stretch, I'm going to add the International Village. The International Village will be a small land celebrating not our unique differences, but our shared goals and similarities. This land will be a vision into a more unified tomorrow with a futuristic and progressive urban design being the hallmark of this land. The International Village will showcase and celebrate all things international. The color scheme and design will be inspired by international organizations like the United Nations and other forward-looking international organizations like the Olympics. Just like how other countries partnered with Disney to make their pavilions, I could see the UN partnering to make this pavilion and sponsoring this pavilion. The west side, where this is, will be more urban, and the east side will be more of a plaza or park. There will be small exhibits dotted throughout the land. This island is definitely too small for attractions, but museums or exhibits should be able to fit. The first attraction I'm titling The Wide World of Global Sport, a small museum or themed plaza where there will be Olympic mascots like plushies and maybe even meet and greets, as well as blueprints and miniatures of Olympic venues that guests can look at and interact with. Disney has a long history of working with the Olympics, making mascots and even helping run a few Olympics. I assume this partnership could allow them to get the rights to the mascots. This should perhaps be a seasonal pop-up exhibit, like only happening when the Olympics are going on, but also considering the Olympics happen every 2 years, since the summer and winter games, it would be a bit silly, in my opinion, to take it down or put it up every year. That seems like a lot of work, and perhaps they should just keep it up. However, if it is something that is there all year, something special should happen here if the actual Olympics are going on. I'm not sure what, but I'll leave that to the Imagineers. Also, in this plaza, during special times, there will be sections dedicated to other international sports depending on what is popular and what championships are happening or coming up. For example, during or leading up to the World Cup, there will be a soccer exhibit. There can be stuff celebrating international motorsports like F1, as Disney and F1 are currently brand partners actually, and just all sorts of sporty stuff, international sporty stuff, if something is happening in the world that's gaining traction and people are tuning into. Over here, in the more urban side, there will be the HQUN, is what I'm calling it, a small building that is inspired by the real UN building in New York City. This will be another small museum or themed building celebrating the ideals, goals, and accomplishments of the UN. This attraction should definitely be there, especially if this land is sponsored by the UN, and I can imagine that being something the UN would really want, a thing celebrating their goals and accomplishments. Lastly, here there is going to be an attraction called Project Antarctica, a small outdoor kid zone themed around the icy tundras of Antarctica. For theming wise, right, how are you going to have icy stuff in the middle of the Florida heat? Think Blizzard Beach. While this is like a kid place for them to run around, there will also be plaques explaining how humanity has come together to leave Antarctica as an international zone for scientists and conservation. I once again want to recognize that there are definitely size constraints here. So if you're like trying to close your eyes and imagine what I'm thinking for these lands and how can this tiny little island fit 3 attractions, these attractions should first not be that big, but also recognize that Disney could expand this island a little bit. I'm not saying that they should or they would in my vision, because these attractions are not supposed to be the biggest in the world and the biggest draws in the world. Like most guests, will see the International Village as a rest stop or a path to get to the French Pavilion or the UK Pavilion, depending on which way you're going. Therefore, there should still be a clear path to go between the two pavilions and not have to like wind around the entire International Village. However, that's not to say that things should be done on the cheap. In fact, the small scale will allow Imagineers to have details be everywhere. These attractions aren't for everyone, but for those who are interested, these attractions should offer a lot. Once again, I'm calling them attractions just because that's the word, but don't think like a roller coasters here. These are small little things that diehard fans will love. And with that, believe it or not, but we need a pause, as that completes World Showcase West. And that also means that not only is World Showcase West complete, but the entire World Showcase is complete, meaning what I'm calling EPCOT 3.0 is officially complete. I didn't touch much of the front of the park, but EPCOT 2.0 didn't touch much of the back of the park, so this is only fair. I added to or revised almost every pavilion in the World Showcase and created 3 new lands, filling out some of the placeholder stuff and the prime real estate. I started off this series in EPCOT 3.0 asking the question about IP in EPCOT, and specifically the World Showcase. Today, EPCOT is a weird place where IP has kicked out the real culture of some of these pavilions, while in others there is zero IP despite there being obvious IP candidates to be added. My answer to the EPCOT IP problem is a little bit of both, and hopefully that comes through in these videos. If there is a character or IP that is explicitly from one of these countries, let them be the Disney draw to then guide guests into learning about the real culture and country. I think this can be seen in my UK and Italian pavilion expansions, to name some examples, where Disney characters headline attractions that are actually about taking guests on tours around their respective countries. This is also why I tweaked some of the pavilions like the French and Norway pavilions. The rides that are currently there are themed towards the IP, and to make a unified EPCOT 3.0, I had to change them to fit what I'm calling the idea of IP tour guides. I also want to reiterate that IP should be kept towards the back of the pavilions something I did. So you walk around the entire World Showcase. If you just walk around that main loop, you really don't see that much IP. The IP is towards the back of the pavilions. That's why most of my expansions are in the back of the pavilions. If you quickly walk around the entire World Showcase, staying on the circular path, it should feel like you are really stopping into all of these real countries. Only as guests decide to explore the pavilion will they find the IP or ride. For example, I tried to emphasize this point with my brand new Tunisia pavilion. This should cause walking traffic to have a good flow as guests don't pile up near the main walkways. Additionally, as I recognize, the attraction and IP are the main draw for most people. This layout forces guests to see and interact with parts of the park they would typically ignore or skip. With that being said, I did add quite a lot of IP to EPCOT. Inside Out, Brother Bear, Mary Poppins, Big Hero 6, Luca, Mulan, and Coco all get featured attractions and land sections. I imagine Star Wars in Tunisia will be the biggest draw for the average guest and something I would be extremely excited for as well. Moving beyond the IP question, I added old promises and some fan service. EPCOT 3.0 has expansions and attractions that were always supposed to be there, like the Rhine River Cruise and the Mount Fuji roller coaster, completing some original visions after decades of abandonment. EPCOT 3.0 has some fan service and long-rumored expansions, like the previously mentioned Coco overlay, and an update into Journey into Imagination, bringing back the Dreamfinder. With all this expansion, it feels like World Showcase is like its own park. You could spend an entire day just walking around and doing attractions in the World Showcase and have a full theme park experience. There are classic dark and log rides, there's a roller coaster and a walkthrough attraction, there are museums, shows, and interactive experiences, and of course, there will be a ton of places to get food and drink. I also hope EPCOT 3.0 makes edutainment king. It seems Disney is also moving from the edutainment part of EPCOT, and I hope with 3.0 I can bring this back. Nearly every attraction I added and reimagined has an element of learning about the culture of these particular places. In the case of the International Village, guests learn about real-life global institutions, and in Dreamworld, guests learn about their emotions with real emotion theory. Now, no one is going to become an expert in anything by going to a theme park, but especially in EPCOT, guests should feel like they learned something, and hopefully EPCOT 3.0 does this. Alright, I'm rambling now. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and I can't wait for you guys to see what I'm working on next. It's not the World Showcase, as I believe the World Showcase or EPCOT 3.0 is completed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Goodbye.